Well, hello and welcome to Business as Unusual. This is the live stream where we delve into the pressing issues and emerging trends shaping the business landscape. So, we're going to get started in just a few minutes, but I want to let everyone know if you've got any questions, we want this to be interactive. So, please add your questions to the chat and I'll try and to get to all of them throughout the session. I'm Kathy Steele, and I'm CEO of Red Caffeine and your host today. And for those of you unfamiliar with Red Caffeine, we're a growth consultancy and we build and execute grow to market plans for ambitious organizations looking to scale. Our service offering includes a fractional team led by a senior level marketing executive that enables a business to scale rapidly without hiring a full range of resources to move their growth plan forward. I'm thrilled. I mean, really thrilled to kick off the year talking about putting customers at the heart of our business focus and being joined by Ryan Paul Gibson, CEO of Content Lift, who is a seasoned expert in the realm of customer research. So, getting input from customers really seems like it should be a top priority for businesses. But as Ryan and I were like prepping for this and talking before the show, this doesn't always become a priority. And we hear things like, we know our customers so well, but I want to ask the question of, do you know the process it took them to buy from you? In B2B sales and in many high ticket B2C purchase decisions, buyers often embark on a long and complex journey, researching solutions for months and sometimes even years. I mean, we've heard people that have purchased from us for in like 4 years. So it's a very long and challenging process. And so this gives marketers both a challenge to get around as well as an opportunity. This extended timeline, presents a challenge because you have to really build a comprehensive program that effectively influences and engages with customers throughout their entire buying process. But the opportunity is immense. And so at Red Caffeine, we've seen firsthand the transformative power of aligning marketing efforts closely with customers' needs and behaviors. So let's jump into the questions. Ryan, so great to have you here today. Could you tell our audience a little bit about you as well as Content Lift? And then tell us something that's not, on your bio, something interesting that our guests would love to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be the first one. I hope I get the year started for everyone watching. I'll go with the bio first, and then maybe I can walk backwards into something that's not on my bio. 21 years in B2B. I took a small detour as an investigative reporter for 3 years in my hometown of Ottawa, Canada, as TV and radio. And I left that. It was a wonderful job, but it was not my calling. But I really crystallized how I approach a lot of my work now. I was heavily into research and sort of using that as the foundation of my go-to-market approach before, but that really upped the game for me, being able to investigate and peel back the nuances and layers of how things happen. So then I went back to the marketing world. I started running a few marketing teams, went on my own 5 years ago. And 3 years ago, 2 years, 11 months to be exact, is when I started Content Lift. And my main focus is really B2B. I call them they're interviews, but I call them investigations. And it's really just trying to deeply understand how and why your best fit buyer makes decisions from that very beginning of them identifying, well, this is a problem, and then them prioritizing to find a solution and working my way all the way to a closed one. So that's really the crux of what I do. And I work with, I've clocked about 1,900 interviews, I think, in my career. Some of that's as a reporter, but yeah, a lot of that now is mostly B2B. And then something not on my bio. Oh my gosh, I have pretty much everything on my LinkedIn. I probably too much there, but one thing that I don't have in my bio is I produced a documentary. I put that up on the wall this past weekend years ago about the electronic keyboard was actually invented in Ottawa, and it's on display at one of the museums here. So I did a report, a documentary on the person who invented it a few years ago. It's on Vimeo. It's very small. It's like 18 minutes, but it was fun. Passion project, right? So that's not on my bio anywhere.
Okay, I love documentaries, but you are the first person I've ever met that has produced one. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, it
You
was
know, I
fun. It was
love
good.
the investigator background. I think it really leads you to being so, thoughtful and inquisitive and curious when you're asking questions. So probably those skill sets, while it might not have been your dream job, those skill sets have really come in handy in your current work.
Yeah, I think so. It feels like it for sure.
So I think we want to start like at the top, kind of, thinking about the B2B buying cycle. And I know you've got a graphic that's on your website that we're going to, queue up for this discussion, just to
Yeah.
kind of give people the sense of what we're looking at. But, how does this impact understanding your customers and building a market strategy to really meet with them where they're at?
So yeah, this is on my website. It's a lot. I've borrowed a lot from a process or a methodology called jobs to be done, and I'm not going to go too deep into it. It's a methodology that's been around for almost 3 decades now. There's a lot of literature around it. There's dozens of books, but for the most part, you're trying to do with jobs be done is you're trying to understand what is the thing that the customer was trying to do in the first place, that outcome, and what was the process of going from identifying that problem to getting to the point of identifying a solution they want to invest money in, right? And sometimes there's a few things they do throughout that cycle before they land on your solution, right? So why I like this graphic, or why I use this graphic in my work, is if you look at the where it says evaluation and decision, that's where we spend most of our time as businesses. That's where most of our interaction is with customers,
Right.
sales, customer success, what have you. That really colors how we see the day to day and influences the decisions we make. And that's where we actually invest most of our time and our budget. The reality is, if you do enough work in B2B and understand buying journeys enough, most of the time they start months or years before that sale occurs. They're identifying a problem and deciding to build a short list, months or years beforehand. And there's all these conditions and circumstances in the business that cause that to happen. Well, what are those things? And then how can you influence them? So we don't where we lack resources, and where businesses often don't invest in, is where buyers start making decisions. It's just that second red line there, and because that's where it actually starts. But we spend most of our time focusing on the end, not at the beginning. I like customer interviews because interviews are the key tool for understanding that initial part of the journey of how they get from identifying a problem and moving all the way to an evaluation of a vendor.
Yeah, I'm curious a little bit about like that front half of the buying cycle. I mean, as we know, buying is not linear. It's kind of starts here, goes back to the beginning. Sometimes, like, how frequently are you talking to people that influence buying decisions, as well as make the buying decisions? Is there a lot of you know people that are in that research process that will be collecting data, maybe putting forth some choices that really aren't going to have the final answer on the solution or the provider that they choose to work with?
Can you rephrase that, Kathy? Like, do you mean businesses doing that, or
I
am I
guess
doing that?
I'm just curious about, I think when we think about sales today, it's there's so many channels, it's so much more
Mm,
complex. But I'm curious about when you are doing interviews, how frequently, and maybe you don't have, exacting data on that, how frequently are you talking to the actual decision maker or the person
oh,
that's influencing the
okay.
decision? Because I feel like that's another unknown
Yeah.
area of who all is a part of the process. Gosh, we all hate it when we get into what we think is the final, boardroom. We're sitting there, we think we're going to close a deal, and then somebody else pops.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we had no idea would be a part of the decision process.
So in my work, I try to speak to the key person in B2B. Historically, often we call that the champion,
Okay.
um, as much as I can. Now, every business model is different, and industries are different. So, for examples, I've done work for customers where their product is bought by someone in an organization, but the users are never involved in the evaluation of the software. That does happen. It's happening less and less, I think, as technology moves forward and advances. Software pretty much dominates the landscape for a lot of things, and you know you have people who are administrators, users, and buyers all in one now. So I like to focus though on that person who is probably there for the entire length of the deal, whether they were the major influencer there for most of it, maybe identified the problem. They might have designated it to someone to go and build the shortlist, but then came back when it came down to evaluating who the vendors were. And the reason I like to talk to that person is they are the closest to understanding what this timeline looks like. Why did that journey start in the first place? What was happening in the business? Why did you want to solve it? What were the approaches you took to trying to solve that? Why did those things not work? Why did you land on us? How did you get it? How did you find out we existed? What did we do different? All these things to why did you choose us as the vendor at the end of the day versus all those other options?
Got it. Perfect. Thank you so much for kind of diving into the process a bit more. So, we're going to talk about how insights can help build strong marketing and sales strategies. So, we really believe that deeply understanding everything about your ideal customer is the best way to actually build more opportunities to get in front of a real customer. So,
Yeah.
you kind of say just talking to them doesn't really do the job. So
Yeah.
why do you believe that organizations should invest in customer interviews?
I'll start with a story first and then I'll sort of expand. So, I was working with a client years ago, and there was a product marketer, software company. Software companies often have product marketers, and for people maybe not familiar with that function, they're responsible for sort of messaging, positioning, how you talk to the market, and so on. So they came. I was working on another project with them, but they knew that my passion was this type of research. They came and talked to me and said, "Oh, I just had a customer interview. It was fantastic." I'm like, "Great!" I was excited for them, and they showed me um, their insights from the conversation. It was 4 sentences on a piece of paper. I'm like, "Okay, this is a start. Let's pull up the recording. We can go through it together. I'd love to hear the questions he asked and what you learned." Oh no, I didn't record it. Oh my gosh, and that's such a missed opportunity because what they wanted to do was just talk to someone and have a nice friendly chat about, did you like our product, you know um, what could we do better, and so on. And those are fine questions to ask because that's very customer success related. You understand if you're doing a good job as a company, but that's not going to help you. Talking to them is not going to help you build out a go to market or a marketing strategy, because what you need to understand is how your solution contextually fits into the process that they're trying to achieve. Because most B2B solutions, product or service, help support a specific business process. What is that process? What is it? How does it unfold within your best fit customers day to day? How do they measure success in it? How do they get from one place to the other? Those are the things that help you build a marketing strategy, because that is where they first start to think about how they help better support that process. I'll give you another example. So I work with a software company here in Ottawa called Rewind. One of the processes they like to talk about in their marketing is called disaster recovery strategy, data recovery strategy, because they have backup and recovery software for major platforms like GitHub or Jira or Shopify. And the reason that I could talk about that and talk about best practices, thought leadership, trends, things you need to know, because their tool fits within that process, right? It's another example would be for marketers out there. HubSpot is not marketing; It just fits within the marketing operations process.
Right.
You need to understand how all these things fit and work together, because your job as a marketer is to influence that target market early on when they start thinking about these processes and how to improve them, and then show why you are the one who is leading the way for the things that you do best. And event that way you're able to succeed in all those things we talked about by staying top of mind, by providing value, by getting on a short list early. So that's why I say don't talk to people. You have to do investigations about the specific parts of the business that you're supporting in your clients. A general conversation about whether they like you or not is not going to help you unlock those insights.
Right. No, I could not agree more. And I think, we both really love that, there's some sort of methodology to how we conduct customer interviews. What do I think you guys have some direction around 5 steps or five
Yeah,
pieces that really kind of outline the things that you should be considering, whether I believe whether you're doing it yourself internally or you're hiring somebody to do it for you, you should make sure
yeah,
that they're thinking like this in
yep.
terms of how they're going to approach the interview process.
So first, you need to figure out, what are the types of interviews that you're going to have. There's different types of interviews, of customer research interviews, because there's different parts of a business process,
Right.
right? There are different parts of the business are impacted by research and data. So, for example, if someone has churned out of your product or your service, what you want to understand there is different than what you would want to understand if you're interviewing, trying to build a pipeline for acquisition and high qualified leads, because they're different parts of the business.
Sure.
Your customer, your onboarding and customer success, that's a different, them using the service or having that service, how it impacts the business is different than talking about like a win-loss interview. So you have to understand, like, where do you want to impact the business, and a lot of that stems from what are your key metrics, what are your KPIs, what is it you want to achieve over the next quarter, 2 quarters, fiscal year. Maybe you want to increase your closed won rates by 5%, right? Maybe the conversion rates on your landing page have dropped over the last 6 months. Well, why, right? So you want to understand, like, what is it I want to learn? So then you have to set a really strong research objective. Like, that's the first step. Set an objective. What do I want to learn? What do I want to talk about? Second thing is you want to understand, who am I going to approach with this research objective? What is the makeup of the person? It goes back to that type of interview I just talked, the types of interviews I just highlighted. Because someone who churned, you don't want to speak to someone, obviously, that is still your customer. That's pretty straightforward. But for someone that, if you understand the buying journey of someone, you don't want to speak to someone that's been your customer for 4 years. You want to speak to someone's close in the last 90 days, because their recall around the steps they took and how they got there will be more succinct than someone who was your customer 4 years ago, or someone who might not even have purchased your service or
Right.
product, but you're still a vendor of theirs. So you need to figure out who you're going to talk to. The second is you want to come up with a really good set of criteria around the conversation, and map out your objectives, like your themes and topics, right? So if your objective is, our churn has increased by 5%, and we think this might be why, then you want to sort of list questions and topics of conversation that guide that discussion you have with the client. Next, you want to record it, and you want to transcribe it and highlight all the key actions and phrases, or key themes and findings, and you're going to sort of consolidate that. And the last part is you want to write actions for every single thing, because that's the whole point of why you did it in the first place. You've learned an insight. What is the actual next step you're going to take within the business, and hold yourself to account? Because, like most things, you can do all sorts of work, but if you're actually not going to try and incrementally improve the business, why did you do it in the first place? So those are the steps that I look at for how you really want to conduct a series of interviews.
Yeah, and I think we're always encouraging an array of ways to collect feedback, from simple satisfaction surveys to in-depth interviews. But what is your thought around how frequently somebody should be doing these more
Yeah,
in-depth interviews? I know this is like a little bit of a softball because it does depend, but do you
it
have
does.
some sense, or can you give some direction on that?
Yeah, I mean, once a year is always sort of the benchmark. That's how we audit most things, is once a year in any sort of business. Um, just as an example, I spoke to a CEO today, and they have noticed in the last few years, they've been around 8 years, software company. They've noticed that in the last two, their pipeline quality and the volume of pipeline started to drop off a little bit. A lot changes in the market around you externally in not alone 8 years, but 8 months, right?
Right.
Another way to look at it is, I used to tell people, what was the total addressable market of video chat before the pandemic? What was it during the pandemic? What is it now? Right? It's probably like this, because markets are not static. Things change around you. New entrants come in. They take away market share. Technology evolves. Chat GPT is a really good example of something that's totally changed the game in the last year. So you need to have your finger on the pulse of the market. So once a year is, I think, the standard. But I think if you find a way to do more agile research, and agility is, I think, important for almost any business, every quarter or so, and finding ways to, okay, maybe this quarter we've set an objective, a goal, an OKR to increase our customer satisfaction rates and NPS score by one. How are we going to do that? And what do we need? What do we not know? Or what is the information we're missing to achieve that? Right. So those are some of the ways that I think of using research sort of consistently throughout the year. And the nice part is, for what I do, qualitative research, you don't have to do a lot of interviews to sort of pull out and extract insights. It can be done with a very small sample size, as long as you have a very focused objective and you're really focused on like the type of conversation you want to have and the learnings you want to get from those interactions.
Yeah, I mean, I love, what you said earlier in that one example around that pipeline that was starting to get, less qualified opportunities. I do feel like when you get good at it and you start to really systemize sales and how you're generating revenue, it's a
Yeah,
lot easier to identify, where your gaps are versus everything's a problem in sales. So when you have it sort of broken down and if the top of funnel is your issue, at least then you can start to work a strategy to improve your top
yeah.
of funnel.
And
um,
if I may, Kathy, just on that, one of the things we often get pushback on, and you touched on a little bit, is we know our customers. People will say that a lot, and they push back on doing this type of work for. I've heard every reasons excuse in the book, and sometimes it's sales doesn't want us to talk to accounts. Sometimes it's we don't want to bother customers. Sometimes we already know that. There's all sorts of justifications people make. I actually, a lot of savvy researchers that I follow that I think do good work, I think this way included, we actually don't use the word research a lot in our work.
mm,
What we do is we align our actions to the objectives of the organization. So, for example, I always, how I see myself is, I look at the core function of what I do as a way to help build predictable and repeatable pipeline for the sales team to succeed.
yeah, no,
That is a
absolutely.
much different way to frame what I do than going to someone in an executive team and saying, I want to change the messaging on the homepage. Well, why do we want to do that? And why do you want to talk to customers about that? What I want to do is say, I see that sales has told me, because I've spoken with them as my respected colleagues and I want to help them, that they're struggling to close these types of deals. I'd like to go understand more about our best fit customers so I can bring more of them in to help sales close more deals.
Exactly. I mean, I think that, most organizations build systems around everything aside from sales. When
Yeah.
you meet an organization that really has a revenue generation system approach to how they're going to market, they just kick ass. It's just like
Yeah,
night and day.
it
So
is.
in terms of the feedback that we're getting, like to your point, there has to be intentionality to what you're using that feedback for. I know for we use it a lot in identifying ideal client profiles, validating value propositions, validating positioning opportunities, and
Yeah.
building buyer personas. Is what are you or some of your clients using that feedback to inform, or what are some of the outputs that you can think about in terms of interview feedback?
It's a lot of the same, but what I feel we add value into is that we're not guessing and making, um, you know, the hypotheses that we have are grounded in the voice of the customer and the actual process of how and why they buy. So let's tackle personas for a second because it's a common term. They're debated. The value of them is debated in B2B. And I would argue it's really just if they're not working for you, it's just a case of garbage in, garbage out. It's a tool that you probably have not used well, and have not the data you've populated that tool with is not giving you any value. Let me give an example. I spoke about the company Rewind a little bit. They're here in Ottawa. Um, I have a case study on my website that I use to showcase sort of how I do this work and the depth of how I do it. And Rewind, when I did the project for them, they had just acquired a piece of software to tuck into their portfolio. They do backup and recovery software. They identified a GitHub solution that they thought would work great, so they went out and acquired it because it's a great acquisitions are a great way to grow. So the intelligence we got from the founding team, they actioned into their go-to-market strategy for the sales and marketing team, but it wasn't the deals were not coming in at the rate that they were anticipating, and you could tell just this chatter from the sales team. You could see something was off because sales is often the canary in the coal mine if something is wrong.
Sure.
So I spoke to the CMO and I got tapped to go and figure out why this was happening alongside one of their product marketing managers. And the reason I say this is because I give this example is because we identified that we were missing key parts of understanding how they made decisions about using us versus other solutions that they could have used, even internal solutions they built themselves. So then we knew how to position properly and we knew how to tell the story in a different way. And the story we told that we were not telling before was that all these people were trying to build their own version of Rewind in house. But we knew why they would fail from a technological standpoint and from just a resourcing standpoint because we were the experts in this domain. So we changed the story. I helped them rewrite a lot of their ad copy. I helped them revise their landing pages, helped them, tell a different narrative, and installs of the product doubled within the first few weeks of us doing that. Very
Yeah.
small things of just talking to customers.
It's
Now,
so amazing because I do feel like there's so many times where like an idea gets killed because it gets into market and it's like, oh, this isn't working. But if you really, dig into and talk to people about why something is not hitting the mark,
yeah,
sometimes it's just a restructure of the messaging or positioning of something that
absolutely.
be, absolutely game changing. So that's unbelievable.
So how I use a lot of this to your question, how do I use this information? So I use it at all stages of the journey to go back to the graphic that we showed at the beginning. I will use it to inform the sales motion. I'll use it to inform sort of that middle ground motion where people are building short lists and trying to understand what their various approaches are. And I'll use it, thank you very much. We'll use it at the beginning where we start talking about the category. What are trends happening in that category? What are, executives like to peer around corners? How do we do that? We talk about the overall, I mentioned business processes. What are the larger business processes that we fit into? How do we help them get better at that? What are best practices? Who else does a good job? How can we highlight that with our partners? And all this is grounded, Kathy, in the exact way of how they evaluate that process, how they evaluate their approaches and decisions around solving challenges in that process, and then get to a decision. So everything, everywhere I throw the dart and invest my money, my capital, my resources, is aligned to that buying journey.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some even, we use a number of things internally, but there's some great templates out there that kind of step you through, and you can have like what you give, what you get,
Yep,
those types of give and
exactly.
take scenarios in the process. So I love that. And so I'm going to ask a little bit of a self-serving question for both of us.
Sure.
But I strongly believe there's a lot of value in having a third party do some of this interview.
Yeah.
I don't prescribe that everything has to be a third party. You can do some interviews that are directed by your own internal team, but talk us through. And I guess here's why. I agree with you that I feel like sometimes it's very uncomfortable to give feedback to somebody that you're
Yep.
going to have to work with again. And it's not like you want the relationship to end, but you really want the relationship to improve in certain key areas. And you've got some great valuable insights to share that about how the business could perform better, but you feel a lot more comfortable just telling somebody that you don't know very well those
Yeah.
types of things. And so, what is your thoughts around the kind of the pros and cons of an external party versus an internal
Yeah.
interview process?
Well, uh, yeah, I get the self-serving nature, but to be honest, I want companies to do this work,
Right.
or else I wouldn't be passionate about it. And I do have this is my self-serving plug. So I have on my website. It's called a DIY guide, and it's my entire process from cradle to grave, because I want people to sort of understand the importance of this when it comes to their marketing strategy and how they, making de-risking making bad decisions within the business, because that's really what I want people to do. That said, what are the pros and cons maybe of doing it yourself? Well, the pros of doing it yourself are you understand the business better than I do,
Sure.
right? You have access to the customers better than I do. You have the ability to ask more poignant questions. Um, the cons are, yeah, interviewing is a technique, it's a skill. I have the luxury. I've just done so many. There's a muscle. There's sort of like a skill set I've formed that a lot of people do not have. And if you go into my guide and you see how I interview, because I give examples of me actually, I do quarterback commentary on my own interviews for people. I do like play by play in the guide, and I'm showing them like why I asked that question at that point, what I'm writing down at a certain point, how I'm getting past certain answers and digging into biases, because that is things I've learned over time. Um, so there are pros to doing it in house, but cons. Hiring a third party, you're right. I will get more honest answers typically, um, and also people. There is a tendency for people now to be hyper concerned or hyper aware of being sold to,
Mm.
almost like a bait and switch.
Yes.
And you see that happen a lot now. I actually had someone reach out to me wanting to do research, and it turned into a product pitch. And I was like, that type of thing people are very concerned about. So you have someone who's an expert. If you're outsourcing, you have someone like me who's an expert. I'll probably get more honest answers. I will do it probably faster. The fastest I've turned around a project is in 9 days. Whereas in house, I know people are juggling many things, and that is always the way. And I understand why that is. So it could take them 3 to 4 times longer than it would take me. I can get you insights very quickly. But there's a cost to me,
Right.
right?
Right. So,
So it's all a matter of sort of what makes sense for you in the business. I I approach it all different ways. So you can hire me to do it as an outside source and service, but I also help coach people. I've done that where I sort of work alongside them so they can take all my knowledge and they know how to do this work going forward, or they can just get my entire brain into the guide or in my guide and sort of run with that, and you have lifetime access. So I just want people to be able to access the knowledge around this and the outcomes that it gives you.
Yeah, and I know we're using some of your thinking internally. So yes, you've got some really strong recommendations on how to conduct this.
Yeah.
So we've got a question which is perfectly setting us up for something else that you have on your website. You've got
Yeah.
184 questions to
Oh yeah.
ask.
Whitney, you're gonna love this. It's coming.
Yes, it's
Um,
exciting.
yeah,
So
it's sorry, let ask your question. I cut you off, Kathy. Go ahead, please.
no, we want to kind of go through the types of questions you have because you've got so many. I think we have a graphic that kind of steps through the
Yep.
many things that you could be asking when you're in. Obviously, we know people don't have a lot of time, so it has to be very
Yeah.
focused on the objective. But, talk to us a little bit about how you've split out, some of these things, touch on a few of the ones that get the most meaningful outcomes.
Yep. So it's a top question I get. Funny enough, right? What are the best questions to ask? The answer is there is no best question. All your job as an interviewer is it's an incremental series of discussions and inquiries within that environment to sort of extract what you need. I think where people get tripped up is they try to cover too much ground at once. There's so many ways that we interact with a customer and a buyer, and there's so much depth you can cover. If people are not familiar with this format we're in now, which is sort of one-on-one conversations over the course of 45 60 minutes, if you're not used to doing them, it's amazing how quickly that time goes, right? And humans by nature don't typically answer questions directly or have recall of things that happened months ago. So you need a process and a system to sort of get get into the mindset of them and sort of extract all those things that have happened. So these are all broken down based on either the types of interview you want to have or lines of questioning that will help you learn things to then action into the business, right? So roles and responsibilities of your best fit buyer, priorities and success, or like where do they spend their time? Where do they spend their money? How do they measure success in the business? How do they measure success in their own role? Why are those the markers of success measurement? How do the other teams measure their success? Pains and anxieties are sort of the fears and challenges around getting those priorities accomplished, right? And so on and so forth. User experience, number 14. How are they using your product or solution? Customer discovery is, are you entering a new market? How do you know your product solution is a fit? These are all different things. But for me, what I do in sort of helping build acquisition pipeline, go to market, acquiring new buyers and turning them into customers, where I like to focus is on 4, 5, and 6. So buying triggers and how they research and how they evaluate, especially buying triggers, because those are the catalysts that we talked about in that first graphic.
Right.
Those are the stakes, right? And they starts where they start to identify, I have a problem here and I really need to solve this. Well, why does that problem exist in the first place? Tell me about your business model. Why is this important within this process? Tell me about this process. How does it work? Right? Who's involved? How does this impact the business's overall objectives? What are the challenges that pop up? Right? So there's all these things that you have to really understand. So um, I hope I'm answering the question, Kathy, but these are all different types of conversations that you could have for an hour. Like you could have a whole half-hour conversation on the roles and responsibilities. Now, things will overlap sometimes in your discussions, but these are key focuses for me because then I can actually zero in on like what I want to learn and then impact into the business.
I absolutely agree. I do think, setting up that hypothesis of what you're trying to solve for and, being more pointed in the types of questions you're asking and really get you down to the root of being able to fill in a buying cycle or somebody's customer experience from end to end. Somebody's asked a question about integrating this in part of their marketing efforts in a
Yeah.
business. Do you have any thoughts on how,
Oh yeah.
encourage?
Yeah. So I'm going to cover a few things here, especially if it's an environment where you're not doing this and you'll run up against some of those things we discussed earlier, objections, internal objections to this process. You know, We know our customers. Oh no, sales does that. Oh, we don't want to bother them. Customer success does that. What do you want to talk about? So first off, you have to understand, what is it you want? What do you want to learn and why? Like, where have you identified that there's gaps in your knowledge in the business? And how do you want to leverage those insights to accomplish what you need to accomplish? That's the first thing. Then you want to approach your colleagues about sort of setting up a cadence to try and get in front of customers. And in the early days, it could be maybe you're just going to join sales calls, right? Because you're sort of just getting you're getting people comfortable with the idea of you getting involved this part of the business, customer research, customer discovery. And you'll take some of those insights from the sales calls and you'll use that to maybe improve your sales enablement, some of your landing pages, create a new case study, testimonial, what have you. The next is you want to set up either a cadence for you going and finding these customers yourself, and again highlighting what is I want to know and who, or helping your other teams identify when there's an opportunity to talk to a customer that can fulfill that type of objective you have, right? And start small. And then just document everything and share all your insights with people. Because I will guarantee people, Kathy, as soon as you start sharing these types of insights with your colleagues, it changes everything. People have an appetite for this stuff because it impacts all their work as well,
I
right?
mean, it's the most impactful thing. I think we do like a research and findings presentation around
Yeah,
customer
absolutely.
data. We have people, we talked about personas. They're like, I know who that is. They like fact
Yeah,
find who on their client list. But yeah, I think you mentioned some great things. We use survey data to extract content themes. So what
yep,
is an issue within your organization that we're seeing many customers mention, and how are you going to resolve it? But when you resolve it and you don't even, you don't highlight that you've resolved it, because you're listening to customer feedback, then you're not really taking advantage of that insight that you learn. So and
yeah,
I think there's just so many different areas that asking questions, both using somebody else that's expert in it, but integrating it into your work process and workflows. I think it just brings so much insight to kind of tweaking and improving all of your sales enablement
yeah.
strategies. So post
And
pre somebody being your customer and post their first experience with you, keeping them engaged and not keeping them as a customer long term.
absolutely. And what I will say at the end is, as you learn new things, make sure you have it accessible for everybody in one repository. One of the things I've really seen work well is if you have some type of internal document. You're welcome, Whitney. Like Confluence, or just a Google Doc, or somewhere where there's like an internal repository where people can. It's like the main Bible of your knowledge. Then that helps everyone. One of the things I actually been working on is an integration with Chat GPT and Slack. And what I've been doing is uploading my clients' um, information that I get for them. So everything you would see around these types of topics, but deeply ingrained in voice of the customer work and how and why they buy, and you can ask it questions in real time. So it's like a live buyer persona that you actually don't have to go and find the information yourself. You just query the Chat GPT in your central operating system like Slack or Microsoft Teams, and it spits back the knowledge you need to like make a decision in that moment. So the key thing is, once you get these insights, make sure that everyone has access to them in some way.
Yeah, I love that. We're doing some similar things with Chat GPT. So we'll have to talk offline and share
Yeah, we will, absolutely.
secrets. So let's get into kind of the last series of the questions, talking about how like interview data really can help impact your growth strategy. Let's is there something that you can share that you've done that have where you've used interviews to maybe re-engineer a marketing
Mm-hmm.
strategy? Is there anything
Mm-hmm.
example you could share there?
Well, I talked a bit about rewind, right? A little bit, and I think that's a really good example where we didn't have all the answers right away in those first sets of interviews. That was a learning over months where We did one sample, we learned some things, we implemented some of the insights, and we went back, right? And we learned more. And as we wanted to move up market, which a lot of companies do, and how you define up market can depend. There's a lot of ways to define up market, but we wanted to sell into larger companies. We really started to refine more and more around who our ideal buyer was, where they sat in the organization, and the processes they cared about. So this past summer, I was working with their chief technical officer and pitching him to talk about those key learnings and findings in the market to then get in front of people, and then get them to some of our collateral, whether it's a new email newsletter, maybe it's a webinar. They're in our system now. We can send them things, and when we're top of mind for them in the category. But I will give another example, Kathy, where I was working with a software company in Europe, and they were debating who their best fit customer was, which happens a lot at the leadership table. Who is it we need to talk to and why? And their business was automating the process of chargebacks. And if people aren't familiar with chargebacks, that's when someone can dispute something on a payment they made online, right? And the bank will automatically refund you the money, and the vendor has to go and work with the bank to prove that the sale actually happened. Well, some people use that process as a way to defraud companies.
Mm.
So they said, okay, well, it's either going to be cybersecurity directors, or it's going to be maybe customer success directors, because some of those teams are using our product too. When I went to interview the cybersecurity people, they could not care less about the few $1,000s they were losing per month after the fact. What they cared about was spending all their budget on keeping people out of the system who were bad actors. When we mentioned getting money back after the fact with chargebacks, they're like, no, I don't care about any of that. Who cares? Customer success teams, when I spoke to them, they said, this is a nightmare. I'm hiring extra headcount. I don't know how to train these people. I don't know how to do this process. I can't help customers anymore. Help, 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 help. So my recommendation was focus there. And there was all these opportunities they had in the market around content opportunities, around things their competitors were not doing that they could possibly do. So that's how you sort of reverse engineer these things, is you understand how they're making decisions and how they think. So then you can sort of take those insights and then push that into your marketing and sales strategy as you build out the company and build out all your assets and programs. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it did. I was thinking it brought on one of the surveys that we had done. We had been working with a client that had made multiple acquisitions in a really fast timetable. It was a lighting product company, and they had a lot of backlash from customers, from some of the clients, or some of the companies that had been integrated into this new business. And so
Yeah.
we used customer surveys to really iron out like what the missed expectations were, how could we improve their buying experience or their research experience, because a lot of them were reliant on product specs and things
Yeah.
to spec in these lighting solutions into their large scale projects. So it was something that provided immense value to the buying experience, but it also, I think, just provided a lot of goodwill. I mean, if you are getting feedback from your clients and you're just ignoring it and doing nothing about it, I think that tells one story. But we all make mistakes, so I think
Yeah.
it was a really valuable learning opportunity for us to take that customer information and really go back to the web experience, really reorganize how information was being showcased and improve the buying and customer satisfaction
Great.
experience with the brand. But so there's so many, we always think we're, putting that best thing out there, but I think using insights and refining experiences is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like let's kind of wrap it up. We're getting close to time. Is there any kind of top things that people should be thinking about as they're planning for this year? Tell us what would
Yeah.
you recommend in terms of prioritization, getting the type of feedback to get from your current customers or prospects?
Yeah. I mean, Oh, that's a big question. So I think if you've never done this work, then you sort of have to set the stage of why you would do it. I am more, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't always follow the rules internally in the corporate world historically. I'm a bit of a, um, I don't want to say black sheep, but I sort of beat my own drum. So oftentimes I would just go and start doing. I'd pick up the phone, and start calling customers, even when I was told to hold off for a bit, because I just need to understand. I've always historically just had an obsession about how people make decisions. I don't recommend that for everybody though, because it can ruffle feathers. So I think you want to understand like what as I'm going into 2024 and we're looking at our yearly objectives. A lot of people have set them either last month or just finalizing them now. And you're looking at the scoreboard. Ask yourself, do I have the information I need to move that number or succeed where I want to succeed in whatever objective or task I've been given? If you don't, and you think that research, whether it's a survey even, right? Survey, what I do, customer interviews, is going to help move the needle there. You have to build a business case for why your time should be spent doing that, right? And then why that's vital for you to achieve that objective. I've seen it too many times over 2 decades where marketing teams get tasked with, we want to increase the number of leads by 20% this fiscal year. Great. How are you going to do that? And they just end up doing more of the same, right?
Right.
And sales just ends up buying more lists, and there's just a frantic frenzy to try and scrape together leads and hit quota at the end of a quarter. Like what a nightmare year after year, and like anxiety that causes. So I think, but you can't just go out and say, I'm going to go talk to customers and do what I want. You have to say, okay, here's our plan, here's the data I'm missing to achieve that plan. I think if we have this data, I can do this, and I want to test that in the market, right? And you start small. I gave the example with Rewind. We didn't go change everything. We just did a few small tests, right, to see the signal we would get back, and we were luckily right. So figure out like what your big hairy goals are. What are the KPIs or objectives to like meet those? What are you information are you missing to impact those things, and then how are you going to go out and get it?
Yeah. Well, so we've got another question before we wrap.
Yeah.
Would you recommend applying this approach to B2C customers?
So yes, I started in like B2B, B2C. I've run some B2C projects, and um, they're often like a bit of a different animal in some ways, depending on what the purchase is. So a lot of what you're doing, Whitney, there is probably like brand and identity type questions. Like, why do you have affinity for this brand?
Right.
Let's just take coffee. You can get a coffee at Starbucks. You can get a coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. Why do you go to each? Right. Part of it is the taste and the quality of the coffee, but why else? Right. There's a reason we choose consumer product X over consumer product Y. A lot of it is emotion. Some of it is affinity for a brand, but you can still have people walk through some of the decision making processes around these things. I did one for a coffee shop a few years ago, and what we wanted to understand was, do they are they coming to us because of there was a small shop in Ottawa, so like 14 locations, like um, like one of those newer cafes where it's like what's what I'm looking for, like specialty coffee. And we want to test, are they coming to us because they like us, or they just not want Starbucks? They want like the quality connoisseur experience, but not like the giant corporation.
Right.
And it turned out they just didn't want Starbucks, but they wanted like a good cup of coffee. So there's all these things, but that's not what they thought. They thought they had built something that was driving their decisions based on what they did. It's more what the customers didn't want as opposed to what they were doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you always have to have, yeah, you can use this in B2C. I think the one caveat though is sometimes purchasing decisions are a bit more shallow than B2B. where B2B has more people involved. There's more stakes. Sometimes a piece of software can be $60,000-$70,000 annually, renewed, right? So, and they fit within a certain structure and process. So often, how I'll look at that in B2C is like maybe a car or a sofa, or right, a house,
I think
right?
that the price point of a B2B or a B2C purchase is one factor. I also think
Yeah,
things like wealth management that comes to mind when you're choosing somebody that you really want to build high
yeah,
trust with. I feel like that type of purchase could really be, be informed by understanding why
yeah.
people are
That's a
working.
great question to ask people. Actually, just as we're wrapping up, I'll ask that. What made you trust us?
Right. Yeah. Trust and
That
credibility.
question, it's a banger. Like it's like the answers you get.
List on the list, or do we got to?
Yeah, I think I hope it is there. I hope it's there.
We're
If
gonna.
not, you have it now.
Well, I cannot, the time has flown by as it always does, but this was so interesting and engaging. Parker, if you wouldn't mind putting up how people can contact Ryan if they've got further questions. Ryan, just so you know, I don't know if you saw it, but Bill said that this was the best session
Yeah,
2024 and the first session. So I don't know, we set
yeah.
those
Thanks, Bill. It's the only one so far, but I do appreciate the sentiment.
exactly. So if you want to, have a question for Ryan that you want to ask directly, please feel free to reach out to him. He shared his contact details here. Put business as unusual in the subject line or mention it in a LinkedIn chat, and so he'll know that you're cool.
Yeah,
You can talk to.
absolutely. I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn. Just reach out. I try to answer everything. I just want to help, right? Like this is a lot. This is new territory for a lot of people, and
It
they're
really,
always a little anxious about like starting. So I'm always here to help.
yeah, I think same with us. I mean, it's where do you start? I really feel like this is such an important aspect to people's plans and strategies. Like, don't be afraid of hearing feedback because it's
Yeah,
really going to be pivotal to your strategy moving your business forward.
it's
So
the only way to get better, right?
exactly. So, all right. Well, want to kind of talk about what's coming up next. But first, want to thank all of our sponsors that we really appreciate their support. Insperity, M3, and HR Source have been our long-term sponsors for Business as Unusual. Thank you. We're looking forward to integrating you this year into our conversations. And then next up on February 15th, we are going to be getting kind of narrow into navigating the future of SEO. There's been a lot of changes. And so this session is really going to be for businesses seeking to enhance their marketing strategies in this increasingly competitive online environment. We're going to feature one of our own. Our SEO expert, Victor Lopez, is going to be in this session, and he's going to talk about the latest SEO trends so we understand how these new trends are going to impact digital marketing and organic traffic. We're going to talk about what everybody's talking about, AI, and how it integrates with SEO, and learn to adapt our strategies to align with some of these AI advancements. We are going to give some practical SEO strategies that you can action for content optimizations and user experience. And then, really how to get better at search engine rankings and engagements. And then we're going to look towards the future of SEO and equip your business with some foresight into SEO's trajectory for strategic long-term planning. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for this Business as Unusual live stream. Again, I'm Kathy Steele, and it was just such a pleasure to be hosting this conversation with you, Ryan. I really enjoyed it. And we hope these strategies and insights shared today are going to empower you to align your marketing and your sales efforts more closely with your customer's journey and drive meaningful growth for your business. Remember, the key to success in marketing is understanding and engaging with your customer at every step of their journey, like we talked about today. We encourage you to apply the learnings from today's session and keep the new ways to put your customers at the heart of your business strategy. For more insights and resources, feel free to reach out to any one of us at Red Caffeine. So let's continue to challenge the usual and push towards innovative, customer-centric business solutions. Until next time, let's keep building badass businesses that people want to work with and for. And with that, we're out.